Yo, what's up guys? It's Bluestone, and before I get into today's video, let me just say that literally 100% of y'all who watch my videos are not subscribed. And it would be greatly appreciated if you like and subscribe because it would really help on my channel. Now let's get into the video. Deltarune. Can't get enough of this game. I love the soundtrack, love the story so far. I love the goofiness of this game, and personally think the game is better than Undertale, to be honest. And I even think the soundtrack is better as well, you know, especially because of like Chapter 4 soundtrack and Chapter 5. I love both of those soundtracks, and you know what? Deltarune in general has one of my favorite soundtracks ever, maybe besides Astral Chain. So what is Deltarune? Well, it's an indie game made by Toby Fox and many other people he hired. Toby Fox also created Undertale, and well, it was originally just him working on Deltarune, but now he's hired other people because he has some type of wrist injury, I think. Deltarune is not a sequel to Undertale. It definitely ain't no prequel either. The game is considered a parallel story to Undertale, yet it does not feel anywhere similar to Undertale, but it does have a lot of similarities to Undertale though. But yeah, Deltarune is quite different from Undertale. It has a 3-party member system, and unlike Undertale, there is no way to be a true pacifist because there are just some mother cluckers that you have to kill in this game. That's just the way it is. Okay, well, not kill, but you know, beat them up. But despite that, acting and sparing is still a thing in this game, and you can still be merciful towards your enemies and turn them into allies, and you can also show no mercy. But unlike Undertale, there's no true way to kill them because they'll just run away when their health is depleted. Well, there is a way, but that's only in the weird route, but I'll probably cover that in another video. And another thing that makes Deltarune different from Undertale is that it's chapter based. Right now, it seems like we may be getting a chapter every year now, with chapter 6 aiming for 2027 release, and there's also a possibility of chapter 7 releasing in 2028. Now, Toby Fox could release chapter 7 the same year as chapter 6, but I doubt it. Anyway, in this video, I'll be talking about Deltarune and all of its current chapters. When Deltarune is finished in the future, I'll probably come back to make another video on it. And yeah, there will be spoilers for Deltarune, so if you don't want to get spoiled, click off the video. Deltarune is very interesting. He plays this fella named Chris, and they are the main character of the game. But at the same time, you aren't really Chris because you kind of just control their soul. And this is also implied at the beginning of the game because of the vessel creator, where you are connected to the system and the voice. And the voice is potentially some guy named W.D. Gaster, but that's a whole nother can of worms. And he asks you to make a vessel, but then it gets rejected by some unknown force. Still have no idea who this person is, but because of them, you play as Chris instead of your vessel. And chapter 1 is just the introduction to the game itself. You get introduced to, well, Chris, of course, characters like Toriel, Noelle, Susie, Birdly, and more. And then you get introduced to concepts like the Dark World, Darkners, and Lightners, and the most important character and mysterious character, Rouse, whose name is an anagram for Azrael. And yeah, Azrael, he exists in this game, and he is Chris's brother. He was in Undertale as well, but anything that relates to him is kind of a spoiler, so I won't go into detail. The guy Rouse is the Prince of Darkness, and he is also the lore master. Later on in the game, you just learn that this guy literally has cosmic awareness, but I'll get to that later. This guy tells Chris and Susie about the legend, which says they are heroes who needs to seal the dark fountains and banish the angels' heaven to prevent the roaring from happening, which is this world-ending event where if too many dark fountains exist, it will fill the skies with darkness, and the titans will form from the dark fountains and destroy everything. And you learn about this from chapter 2, so I may be getting ahead of myself. The battles in this game are very simple. They're turn-based. You can either kill or spare the enemies, and it's inspired by Shin Megami Tensei, where you can fight the demons or spare them and force them to work for you. That's essentially what goes on here. And yeah, this is true that the spare and act system is inspired by Shin Megami Tensei. I'm pretty sure there was an interview or something about it. Yeah, anyway, acting is the system where you can choose something, and depending on what it is, it will allow the enemy to be spared. Or later chapters, it will fill up a mercy bar, and then you can recruit them to your castle town. The castle town thing doesn't come into play until chapter 2 though. But violence will cause them to be lost, and yeah, this is another thing from chapter 2 and onward, so you don't have to worry about it in chapter 1 though. But yeah, battles are pretty simple and not very in-depth. Oh yeah, I also forgot about one other thing. The soul thing, you know, you can move around the soul in this box, and yeah, there can be bullets that hit it, and you gotta dodge them. Sometimes battles can be very gimmicky though, so maybe it is a little more in-depth than I say it is. But also in chapter 1, besides getting introduced into the overall gameplay, we get introduced to Darkners like Lancer, who's the son of the king, who is, well, the king of the first Dark World. And the king hates Lightners because they abandoned him or something. He's kind of like the bear from Toy Story 3 a little bit. King is a tyrannical ruler, and all of his servants hate him, except Rules Card, who's the Duke of Puzzles and the second in command. His puzzles suck, by the way. Now, going back to the Lightners, let me talk about Susie. So Susie's a monster, if it wasn't obvious already, and she gets character development in this chapter. She has no friends at first, but that ends up becoming best buds with Lancer and Chris. She starts out as a mean girl, but gets nicer throughout the chapter. Like, for example, she will attack everything in sight until she has her final battle with Lancer, where she then spares him because she does not want to kill him. And after that, she learns to spare stuff and whatnot. Yeah, character development, I guess. Now, this chapter also introduces super bosses, which is interesting. You know, they introduce super bosses in chapter 1. Usually, they would be introduced later in a game, but, you know, whatever. Like, for example, the super boss for chapter 1 is this guy named Jevil. He's a jester with the power of chaos. And to fight him, you gotta find these keys around this dark world. Like, there's one in the field, one in the forest, and one from this shopkeeper named Sham. Sham is heavily associated with these super bosses for some reason. They want to collect the shadow crystals, which are these things that the super bosses will drop, and nobody knows why Sham wants them. Probably won't know the reasoning until chapter 6. Anyway, Jevil is definitely one of the harder super bosses, probably right besides the knight and the super boss from chapter 5. And after beating him, you get the shadow crystal, and depending on whether you choose violence or not, you'll get either the devil's knife or the Jevil's tail for a mercy run. And since I'm going for a mercy run, I got the Jevil's tail, which is an armor. And chapter 1, of course, ends with a battle against the king. And his battle is very easy, like really, really easy. And he has like at least 7 attacks, which kind of sucks because I was hoping it would be harder. But you know, it is what it is. And if you have recruited everyone in this chapter instead of choosing violence, your recruits will save you from the king. And you have to seal the Dark Fountain to end this dark world. And you gotta say goodbye to everyone before you seal the dark world, which is interesting because they make it look like you'll never see these people again. And Rousey without his hat looks mad familiar, and surely it's a coincidence. And yeah, it somehow is a coincidence. When you seal the Dark Fountain, it turns out that this dark world was an unused classroom. Yeah, the dark worlds are formed based on where the Dark Fountain was created. So yeah, this unused classroom became the Card Kingdom. This game is kind of like a weird Toy Story. So yeah, by the end of this chapter, Chris and Susie become good friends, and Chris skipped the whole day of school by being in the dark world. You also get to explore the hometown a bit, and you can choose to talk to people or just go straight to bed and start chapter 2. But chapter 1 overall is probably the most boring chapter in my opinion. Now, that does not mean it's bad. I personally think it's just kind of boring. I kind of skipped over this in chapter 1, but you get put into prison, and this is used like 4 times throughout the entire game. It happens in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 5. Yeah, it skips chapter 4, but it happens again in chapter 5. I don't know why, but it just bothers me a little bit. Chapter 2 of this game is what everyone considers to be the best chapter, but I think it's kind of overrated. Yeah, it was, you know, great when it first released, but I think chapters 3 and 4 are better, you know, especially chapter 4, and maybe even chapter 5, but chapter 4, man, that's like the peak of the game, to be honest. I mean, chapter 2 is good, but I don't think it's the peak of the game. It has a lot of good moments, some good comedy, but some sections of this chapter just kind of drag on a bit, like Cyber City in particular. This area kind of just drags on, and it's kind of boring on the main route. It's more interesting on the weird route, which is crazy, and it's probably because of the mouse puzzles. There's just so many mouse puzzles. Now, I should probably talk about what chapter 2 is about. The story for chapter 2 is that someone opened a dark fountain in the library, and Noelle and Birdly have been pulled in, so it's up to Susie and Chris to help them. And Noelle gets captured by Queen in the beginning of this chapter here, and Queen is like my 3rd favorite character. You'll learn about who my number 1 favorite is later on. Now, Birdly, he works for Queen, and you even get to have a boss fight with him later, and he's on like a roller coaster, and his cart thing looks kind of drunk. This chapter also introduces the more intricate recruit system, and you have to recruit a certain number of enemies to add them to your castle town. And if you beat them up, they'll be lost, and you can never recruit them again. And you also won't be able to recruit Newbert. So if you miss one, you won't get Newbert. Speaking of castle town, you'll get to go back there in chapter 2, and it includes all your recruits from chapter 1. You talk with them if you want to. But anyway, back to Cyber World. There's a punch-out styled minigame in the beginning here, and it's just foreshadowing the main boss of the chapter. Also, I just like how the save point says you were filled with the power of video game violence. Also, kind of a hot take, but I think I like Birdly as a character more than Noelle. She's like mad boring compared to Birdly, but she is more interesting in chapter 5's weird route though, but it's kind of sad that she's only interesting in that though. She also gets mogged by Queen, to be honest. Queen is a highlight of this chapter, and one thing about Queen that's kind of funny is the fact that she just shows up randomly. She's kind of like a passive Mr. X who just shows up and talks to you and then leaves in random instances. Like, she shows up again and plays the throne game, tells you to watch this, she wins, and then gives you the prize and then leaves. The only part of this chapter she doesn't really show up in randomly is the mansion segment. Well, she appears on a TV screen, but that's besides the point. Also, you can give the prize to Noelle or Susie or Rouse. I gave it to Birdly. Why? Because why not? Let him have fun for once. And in the same room, Noelle gets to follow you around. Same with Birdly. Oh yeah, and Star Walker joins in too. Birdly only joins in when you give him the prize, by the way. And speaking of Star Walker, this guy shows up in every chapter. He appears in this room after you ring the bell in chapter 1, and when you talk to him, he says his most iconic line: "These birds are ticking me off. I am the original Star Walker." He also shows up in chapter 2 as well, and is in your key items as well. Same with Lancer and Rules card, I guess. I should talk about the Queen's Mansion, which is like final area of the chapter, and this is probably the best part of the chapter, but unfortunately does reuse the prison plot line that I mentioned earlier. That gets reused 4 freaking times. You are very unoriginal, sir. Though unlike the prison in chapter 1, everyone has their own prison cell and it's personalized based on their search results. And to get out of prison this time, you gotta summon Lancer via the key items to get out, and he will request 999 shovels to overload the system. Queen's Mansion does have puzzle solving, and the puzzles do not consist of mice, which I appreciate. Also, Birdly gets like mad jealous that you can solve puzzles and accuses Chris of cheating. Never thought I'd hear him mention wave dashing though, but he is a gamer though, so I probably should have expected that. Also, the fact that he may or may not have a crush on Susie is kind of funny. And speaking of Susie, she does get some new stuff in this chapter, like a healing spell. It sucks though, don't use it. She learns healing magic from Rouse. This becomes more important in chapter 4 though. And something else that this chapter explains is that if Darkners aren't in their respective dark worlds or in Castletown, they will turn to stone. And this is due to them not being compatible with any darkness that isn't from their dark world or from the Castletown's dark fountain, which is made of pure darkness. And unfortunately, Lancer turns to stone. Now, I don't want to talk about this chapter for too long, so I'll just skip ahead and talk about the end, which involves Birdly and Noelle getting captured by Queen yet again. Now you gotta fight Queen, who has a 2-phase boss fight. And the first phase is having you either free Birdly with acting or using violence to beat up Queen. Now, the violence version does have consequences, like Birdly getting his arm broken, and that's why going with Mercy is probably the best way to do it. And the second phase is her using a giant robot that was in her mansion, and you also get your own giant robot. And here's something cool. The mech design is based on what you created during the Thrash Machine segment in chapter 1. Yeah, the Thrash Machine was supposed to be a boss that you essentially create, but it gets discarded. Sounds kind of familiar. Anyway, it comes back here because of Rules card, and you get to use it to beat up Queen in a punch-out style boss fight. You gotta punch her, dodge her attacks. And yeah, the arcade game was foreshadowing for this boss fight. It's probably my favorite main boss besides chapter 3. Now, she does have some attacks that use the usual soul and the box stuff, but I think it's like only 1 or 2 attacks though. Overall, the boss is pretty easy, and you can probably easily beat it without taking a hit. So when you win against her, you actually kind of lose due to the fact that she has detachable hands. And this leads to an interesting moment with Noelle and Queen, and you start to get a look at how Noelle is as a character. And this is basically because Queen convinced her to at least consider making another fountain. Even Birdly joins in to try and make another fountain, but Rouse tells them not to do it because of the roaring. Now, I already talked about that earlier, so there's no need to bring it up again. But yeah, this is the part of the game where the roaring is explained. And after you seal the fountain, you are able to return to hometown again. And this time, Susie follows you around. And also, something I forgot to mention is this guy named Onion San in chapter 1. If you talk to him in chapter 1, you talk to him in chapter 2, and he says he's gonna investigate the lake or something. But then in chapter 4, the guy just doesn't show up anymore. I wonder what happened to him. Now, like I said before, chapter 2 is great, but I do think it's a tad bit overrated. But now I want to talk about chapter 3. Now, chapter 3 and 4 were released at the same time because both of these were in the works for quite a while, since 2021, in fact. I was gonna say, wow, that was a long time, but it was only 4 years, so that's not that bad. But man, that wait felt like it lasted forever. I low-key forgot about this game after like 1 year, I'm not even gonna lie. But chapter 3, in my opinion, is probably the second best chapter in the game, in my opinion. I just said in my opinion twice. But I like chapter 1 and 2, but 3 and 4 are just kind of better, you know, man. Chapter 3 is set in the TV world, and it's a dark world made by Chris. Yep, they made this dark world. And the end of chapter 2 actually shows shows this. I did skip across that because I don't feel like going into too much detail in this video. But yeah, Chris made this dark world in their house when Susie was sleeping over. Now, both of them wake up in this dark world, and in this chapter, you learn more about the dark world and how this game is kind of similar to Toy Story. And we get this info from Lore Master
Raleigh,
and he basically says how dark nerds don't matter because they aren't real. They're just objects in the light world. Susie gets mad at him for saying this. After this, you immediately get introduced to my second favorite character in the game. You'll learn about who my favorite one is later. And it's Mr. Antenna. This man has a whole cutscene dedicated to him. He's got funny images in his text boxes, and he's literally 3D, and he's just basically Steve Harvey. What's not to like about him?
Yes, sirree. Thought about killing myself.
But this guy literally forces Chris, Susie, and Rouse onto his game show by using guilt tripping. And throughout this entire chapter, you engage with the goofy antics and crazy physical challenges. Yeah, that kind of sounds like an ad. But you also get to play this Zelda-like minigame with Susie and Rouse. The goal of these is to get the best rank possible, like S rank. Now, there is a T rank, but it's not worth it. You gotta do quizzes, collect keys, fight some weather people, and do a physical challenge to complete the first board. And yeah, these weather people are La Nino and El Nino, and they're a couple. El Nino is a cloud. I thought she was based on the moon. And La Nino, he is based on the sun. And these two end up getting involved in a crazy subplot with the rules card. And this subplot begins during their boss fight where they have a falling out, and then rules card chimes in asking if they're single. And then in the second board, this guy decides to just get in the throuple with these two so he can become second in command. What is wrong with this guy? Anyway, physical challenges, they are mini games, and the first one is a chef mini game. And basically, you stack food on your head and throw them into customers' mouths. Also, you have to dodge fire. There's also these special customers, which are either La Nino or El Nino, and they give you more points than the average customer. This mini game is pretty fun, but I'm actually sad that you can't replay it after beating the chapter. If you get at an S rank though on the board, you unlock the S rank room. Instead of looking like a luxurious room, it basically just looks like a dump. Well, this dump contains my favorite part of chapter 3, the mantle minigame. This minigame is heavily based on Legend of Zelda games. It even has the same attack button as like the OG Legend of Zelda games. And heck, some of the files for this minigame are literally named after Zelda. This is probably why chapter 3 and 4 was released on Switch first. I actually don't feel like going too in-depth on the mantle game, but it is heavily related to the weird route though, so I might talk about it in my weird route video instead of this one. So I'll just move on. And there's also this room that has some stuff in it, like the A rank room or the B rank room or the C rank room. And the B rank room has this weird gacha machine. You know, you can get some prizes from it, but if you input 1225, you get sent to the Deltarune equivalent of the back room. So this is this weird place that has no fudging collision, and you have to find a smaller blue version of the gacha machine to get out. It has this very vague flavor text where you grab something that's probably like a guitar pick, falls through your hand, then you can't find your hand. No idea what this is supposed to imply. Now it's time for the funny stages, as Lancer says. When Tenna introduces each board, he shows what they're supposed to look like. And the first one is a desert with a pyramid, and the second one is an island that has Atlantis. And why does Atlantis look so ominous? And it also looks like there's some weird cat-like thing next to it. I wonder what's that about. But yeah, in board 2, you take pictures to progress, and there's like 3 pictures that you gotta take. There's also an extra 4th picture as well. Board 2 is arguably more fun than the first board. Also on board 2, when you try to go to the top when you get the wrath, Tenna will get mad at you when you start going too far up. Like, he literally starts freaking out. And then if you see the area he doesn't want you to see, he would just tell Mike to cut it. And then you get sent back here. Now there's signs that just say under construction. It's so weird, man. You can also go back here when Tenna leaves for a bit, but Rouse will get spooked because he supposedly doesn't know what's up there. But I definitely think he knows what's up there, especially since it has something to do with the weird route. Well, kinda. The physical challenge for board 2 is a rhythm game. You play this song named Raise Up Your Bat, which actually has lyrics, but no vocals though. But there's just lyrics where the vocals would have been. And Rouse censors the original lyrics though. No idea why he does that. But the minigame is fun, and it's like Guitar Hero if it was made by someone who's never played a rhythm game before. That's like the best way to describe this minigame. There's no board 3, unfortunately, because it got canned for some pacing reasons, which is understandable, I guess. So chapter 3 concludes with Tenno losing his mind and forcing you to play his games forever. And yes, there is yet again another prison break sequence. And after that prison break, you get to explore the entire TV world. And unfortunately, it is mad short. I wish it was bigger because it's such a good area. And during this, you get to witness Tenno losing everything he had built up because no one wants to work with him anymore. And all of this will build up to a battle with Tenno himself. And his battle is 100% inspired by WarioWare. I mean, look at this, man. The transition animation is even similar to stuff from WarioWare. And this boss is probably my favorite main boss, mostly because it's just like WarioWare, and I love WarioWare. The man doesn't have many attacks though. He probably only has like 5 unique attacks. Most of the danger comes from failing the mini games, because if you fail them, you start taking damage. But anyway, after beating Tenno is where things get interesting. Bro gets his arms chopped off by the Roaring Knight. And fun fact about the Knight, this guy was mentioned in chapter 1. I don't know how people missed this, but Sean mentions it. Anyway, you gotta fight him. And it's the hardest boss in the game so far. You can make the battle easier with the Shadow Mantle, which you get from fighting this little freak in the 3rd board of Mantle Game. Though you should probably equip it on Susie since he deals the most damage in this fight. Chris does the least damage though. And why, you may ask? Because this traitor is working for the Knight. Anyway, my tactic is just to spam Brood Buster and hope that I can survive. And if you die on a completed save file, Gaster will chime in saying, "Dog, you were meant to lose this fight, but you want to try again anyway." This is probably like one of the only times he actually chimes in to save something, man. Anyway, if you win against the Knight, you get the Black Shard, which deals a ton of damage. It deals more damage to dark-based enemies. And you also get a Shadow Crystal. Yes, this boss is required for the Shadow Crystal quest. But the chapter does end after this, whether you win or lose. Undyne gets kidnapped by the Knight and put into the shelter. And this chapter ends on a cliffhanger, showing Chris opened the shelter. But yeah, Chris is a traitor. Anyway, chapter 3 is very fun, man. It may not be the best story-wise, but it's definitely great. I do wish that Torio was actually in this chapter, besides being relegated to a MacGuffin, though. Now, chapter 4 is the peak of this game, like I mentioned before. It's also the most story-heavy chapter in the game because it's set around the prophecy, the real one, not the really shortened down one that Rouse tells you. And before getting into the meat and potatoes of this chapter, I want to talk about Castletown right quick. So, Castletown is very different after chapter 3. You play some funky music and buildings are different. And now there's a TV studio. And in this place, you can replay the rhythm game from chapter 3. And also in this TV room is the Mike room. Mike is a character that the dude Spamton mentions during one of his dialogue options in the shop. You know, I just realized I completely skipped over Spamton. I thought he was in the script, but no, I just forgot to write him in the script. But yeah, Spamton is a character that appears in chapter 2. He's like the secret boss of chapter 2. I completely forgot to mention him. Well, it's more like I completely forgot to write him into my script. But yeah, this Mike character is related to the dude Spamton, and Mike is a guy who works for Tenno, or did work for Tenno. I don't know, man. Mike is a weird guy. Behind this door has the answer for Mike. And after you enter this code 6453, which literally spells out Mike, the room has a gimmick battle with Mike, but not just one Mike, 3 Mikes. And they're based on what the community thinks Mike is. One is a cowboy, one is a cat, and one is a microphone man. And after this battle, you can go down this long hallway. If you stand here for a few seconds, you will see an actual Mike. Yep, this is the real Mike. Probably not. You also get to unlock some other mini games as well. But the only problem is that these mini games are only accessible from chapter 4, and you cannot play them in chapter 5, which is so stupid. Anyway, moving on. Before I forget to mention this, Sans has a really funny moment in this chapter. He just trolls Chris and Susie. He'll just keep changing his shop sign because Susie will complain about it, and then he just changes it to his face, and you get this great dialogue. What the heck does that sign mean? It seems to indicate some kind of sand. So does it say the door is open or closed? Guess it just means there's a skeleton in front of the door. But the door's locked, right? It's closed. Locked? Nah, it's been unlocked this whole time. So it is open. Nah, no one is in there, but it's not closed. It's in an in-between state, like clopid. Kind of makes you wish we had a sign for that. Sans is such a troll, man. So, chapter 4 is about how Chris and Susie are searching for the codes to the shelter. Well, mostly Susie, because Chris is a traitor. So after you're forced to go to church, you go to Noelle's house to search for the codes. And Susie and Noelle have a thing, apparently, you know, a relationship, and this chapter builds upon that. But I don't really care that much, because poor Chris. Chris deserved better, the poor depressed kid. But anyway, some shenanigans related to December holidays guitar happens. Yeah, December is like Noelle's sister. I completely forgot to mention her as well. But I'm pretty sure she gets mentioned at what? Chapter 2? Oh yeah, she gets name dropped in chapter 3 as well. I completely forgot to mention her. But yeah, after some of these shenanigans related to her guitar, Susie will eventually take the guitar and play it downstairs. Then Chris fudging snitches on her by calling up Noelle's mom. And then she sews up and kicks Susie out and Asgore, I guess. But after that disaster, you have to go home, but the door is locked. So you try to visit Toriel in the church, and yep, the Knight made a dark fountain in the church. And now you get to explore one of the best dark worlds in the game, the Dark Sanctuary. Not only does this dark world have the best music in the game, it's also just a very fun area to explore. This place is kind of similar to a waterfall from Undertale. It serves as the lore area, and also there's just a lot of piano stuff here as well. Like, there's a lot of piano puzzles in this dungeon. That's not bad though, because they're just way better than the mouse puzzles from chapter 2. And now throughout this dark world, you'll see these prophecy panels, and these are important because they show stuff that A, already happened, or B, will happen in the future. Like, for example, this Lancer prophecy panel. The pointy-headed will say toothpaste and then boy. Yes, this is something that already happened, because I think in either chapter 1 or 2, I think it's chapter 1, Lancer calls Rouse toothpaste boy. There's also another funny prophecy panel where it says Jockington grows the beard. Yes, this snake guy named Jockington grows a beard. No joke, he literally grows one in chapter 5. This chapter also has a new battle theme, but the problem is that it does not get used in chapter 5, unfortunately, which sucks, man. In this chapter, you also get to meet Gerson Boom, and spoiler alert, this guy's fudging dead. This guy originated from Undertale, and he's dead in the Deltarune world. And you can even find his grave in the cemetery in hometown, and the Dark World revived him, which is an interesting twist, which could potentially affect something in a future chapter. Noel's dad who's in the hospital. Oh man, my cough is crazy today, man. Gerson is basically the kung fu teacher for Susie in this chapter. He even helps her improve her healing magic in this chapter. She doesn't want to use healing magic in this chapter because of Rouse. Rouse acts weird in this chapter, mostly because he does not want Susie or Chris looking at the final prophecy panel. And so when Chris gets injured in the beginning of the Dark World after falling because of the night, Susie tries to heal it, but it doesn't work. But then Rouse shows up and heals Chris easily. So it just makes Susie feel like her magic is useless because of that. But Gerson just basically helps her overcome this after the Jackenstein battle. Now, who is Jackenstein? He is this guy who's a boss fight, and he's introduced in this new thing called a Dark Zone, where it constricts your TP so that you can't use attacks or spells. And his battle is centered around light, and he's based on YouTube poops. Like, his voice is based on Link Faces of Evil Ganon. Like, listen to his voice lines. This battle uses a lot of voice mixing for some reason, and the last part of Jackenstein's battle is probably the funniest part, especially because of this clip here. There's a lot of funny interactions with Gerson in this chapter, especially since you can use him in an act. Like, for example, during this battle, after a puzzle, you can use Old Man, and if you use it twice, he will recruit the enemies, and they will be in his study. And after you beat Jackenstein, though, you get the Climb Claws. I have no idea why they're spelled like that, though. And you can use them to climb up stuff, and this unlocks a whole bunch of stuff in this Dark World. Now you'll be able to, like, get these 3 parts of a melody, and when you get all of it, you can get the magic axe for Susie, and it's basically owned by Gerson. So to get the axe, you gotta engage in a battle with Gerson, and yeah, this is the secret boss of the chapter. It is probably the best one in the game because it's just so fun, man. This battle is based on Undyne's battle from Undertale, and you can obviously tell. You even get the green heart, and also Gerson's theme is just basically Undyne's theme from Undertale. It's probably because he trained her, at least in Undertale. I don't know about Deltarune. But when you manage to hit Gerson, you win. And his dialogue also changes depending on if you beat him first try or not. I beat him first try, so I actually got some unique dialogue that I never seen before. Chapter 4 basically has like 3 Dark Worlds. The first one is the Dark Sanctuary, and the second one is the Second Sanctuary, which is the one that Susie creates. Also, Susie may be colorblind because of the way this Dark World looks. And yeah, something Rouse mentions that Dark Worlds are born depending on who makes them. So since he made it, it looks like this, which means he may just be colorblind, man, which is crazy. And now the third one is the Third Sanctuary. And the second Dark World is made because they need a code to get into the main church because, well, there's a Dark World in there. And that's the Third Sanctuary, by the way. Dark Sanctuary was just like the entrance of the church, while the Third Sanctuary is the main church area, which is cool that there are 2.5 Dark Worlds in this chapter, though. But skipping on ahead, in the Second Sanctuary, you get to fight a Gerson statue in this one. But man, that fight is so awful, man. I hate this boss fight, man. But after this fight is when you learn that Rouse has cosmic awareness. Like, he knows everything except for certain things. But they also expand upon this in chapter 5, though. But the Third Sanctuary is where this chapter ends. It also just looks so cool, man. Like, this area is so awesome, and the music is just so awesome too, man. I really like this segment with the piano where you get to control it to escape the dark mist, and because it kind of reminds me of a Kirby game. That's probably why I like it so much. And then there's my favorite section where Chris's soul starts glowing, then you trek through this dark hallway while the knight throws swords at you, and then everyone moves in front of Chris to stop Chris from dying. This part is just awesome, man. The music as well makes it probably my favorite moment in the game, to be honest. And then the knight, by throwing 5 swords into the ground, summons a titan by creating another dark fountain. Man, this animation is so cool, man. It literally looks like all the budget went here, bro. And then you get to climb up this stone fountain in this really cool climbing segment, and you gotta fight these titan spawns, which kind of remind me of Gaius from Mother. Also, I did not know this, but one of the earlier dark zones in this chapter actually has Titan spawns chase you down. I guess they can spawn in like the deepest dark or some man. I don't know. But anyway, once you reach the top, you get to fight the Titan. And also, I like how it kind of looks like a human silhouette when it first appears. That detail is rad. But this boss is actually very easy, especially when you have the black shard plus the shadow mantle. Not only does it barely do damage, you can also just kill it really fast, and it makes the fight last for like 5 seconds. It's such a shame though, because the Titan's so cool. But remember how Rousey doesn't want Susie to see the end of the prophecy? Well, she saw it anyway, and she did not like what she saw, and so she punched in, started bleeding. I don't think monsters are supposed to bleed. They never bled in Undertale. But yeah, chapter 4, in my opinion, is the best chapter in the game, and I will not hear otherwise. Okay, I don't want this video to be too long, so I'll just get to the point. Chapter 5 is okay. I don't think it's as good as Chapter 4 or 3, mostly because it has the same issue as Chapter 2, where all the cool story stuff is pushed towards the end. And also, once again, the characters end up in prison, which is the plotline that I mentioned. It's reused 4 fudging times. Now, Chapter 5 it really isn't that good when it comes to the story, to be honest. Okay, maybe. I don't know. I've replayed it like twice so far, but I don't know. I kind of don't vibe with it that much. Now, the gameplay in this chapter is really good. But in this chapter, this part kind of makes it worse, in my opinion. In this chapter, Chris is relegated to being the third wheel for Noelle and Susie. It's just kind of sad to watch this poor kid see the only girl they like being taken away from them. And this is also shown in the ending of the chapter where Chris just walks away sadly. Dude, this poor fudging kid, man. The festival segment of this chapter is cool, though. And this blue bird, named in the files a normal NPC, killed Onion San. Yeah, he just straight up turned the poor sod into takoyaki, man. Poor Onion San. And now Burger Pants or Pizza Pants, this NPC, you know, he came from Undertale, but he works for a pizza company instead of Metaton, like in Undertale. And he has a subplot that finally paid off in this chapter. And the subplot was about him getting catfished. And you can either make him crash out at the blue guy who was catfishing him, or you can save his life. And I saved this man's life by telling Caddy to go up on stage. And then she ends up going on a date with him. His life has been saved. Good ending. Now, the dark world in this chapter was made by Chris yet again. And Chris made this dark world so Asgore could get kidnapped by the night, I guess. I don't know why they made it, but the dark world is cool, though. It probably has my favorite character in the game. And just like Atena, this guy has a whole cutscene dedicated to him. And what's funny about it is that it's an anime cutscene. I don't know why Flowery gets a whole anime cutscene, man. And when I seen this, I did not know what I was getting into, man. But also, apparently, the same studio that animated fudging Evangelion animated this cutscene, bro. Toby Fox has crazy reach, man. What the heck? And besides Flowery, there's the other flowers like Aqua. She's one of my favorites as well. Seth, don't really care about this one very much. And Blue, I don't dislike him or like him that much. He's just not very interesting. Green is cool. Orange is funny. She's very funny. I like Orange. And Yellow is probably the best character besides Flower, dude. This guy is unhinged, man. Throughout the entire Flower Castle part of the chapter, this guy just looks for different ways to kill himself. And he literally says how he has to find a way to blow himself up because he, and I quote, deserves it. What is wrong with this guy, bro? Chapter 5's Dark World as a whole is seemingly a fusion of Chapter 1 and 2. The field is basically a one-to-one with the field from Chapter 1. It even plays a rearrangement of the Field of Hopes and Dreams. But I kind of think the rearrangement isn't as good as the OG version, though. Like, no offense, though. I just don't really like it as much. And speaking of remixes that aren't as good as the OG version, the battle theme named Rude Buster gets a new rearrangement or remix in this chapter, and it is not as good as the OG track. Like, it's a good track, but I still think Rude Buster in a new version from Chapter 3, Ruder Buster, is still better. And speaking of the soundtrack for this chapter is probably one of the best in my opinion. Like, the soundtrack is absolutely immaculate, honestly, Pete. Especially the music that plays in the cliffs area, man. This track is the best area theme in the game, hands down. This chapter also introduces a crazy new gameplay mechanic, the Pedal Feather. This thing changes the entire perspective of the game and turns it into a 2D platformer with action mechanics. Like, it even has an attack button, man. And it also still has acts. Like, Rousey can hang down from stuff and be used as a platform, and Susie can use different versions of Rude Buster. And it's very cool and leads to some very awesome moments during this chapter. I can't wait to see if Chapter 6 is going to use this. Now, also, there are these Temple Run-esque running segments as well, and they're pretty cool too. They're used for some segments in the game. Now I want to talk about the characters in this chapter, like Asgore. Asgore is the main focus of this one. What's interesting is that he already knows about the Dark Worlds and Dark Mountains because of that day, the day that December holiday went missing. People say how this part has him being the vague post king, but he's not actually being vague because he's talking to Chris, who is quite possibly there during whatever happened on that day, the day that the first Dark World opened up. What's interesting about this cutscene is all the weird root imagery, like the screen with the black text. It even plays the weird root stab sound effect. And the music kind of sounds like something out of the weird root too. But not only that, the same stab sound effect plays several times in this part. And another thing that's weird is that Chris is not red in this part. Chris has the same color as Aqua. There might be some implications there, but I'm not too sure. Anyway, Asgore in this chapter is very interesting. He also has like so much aura in this part here when he kicks them out of the Dark World. Like, look how much aura he has, bro. Now, Susie, in my opinion, acts really weird during this chapter. I don't know what's up. She kind of feels out of character, and I don't know why, man. Now, Ralse is a big part of this chapter. Not only does he reveal the fact that he can see the game UI and how others can see this other layer, he's also just mad throughout the entire chapter. Like, he literally hates Flowery. Okay, he doesn't hate Flowery, but he hates just how he just hates how he does things, apparently. During that same part, he yells at Flowery, saying he could burn him down in an instant if he loses control. Now, Ralse is just going through something in this chapter, man. I don't know. But speaking of Flowery, this guy is the funniest character in the game. He has a lot of voice clips, and I mean a lot.
Leave it to me. Here I come, San Francisco! It's my Jerome.
Even Jackenstein and Tenno could not compare to this guy. He just says the randomest stuff ever. Like, what in the world is a Gerona? This guy also has meta knowledge like Ralse. This guy's aware of stuff in like the game UI and the stat system. Even tells fudging Susie about the game UI. And, like, for a singular battle, you get him on your party, and he has a 999 health and maximum stats. But these are fake stats, by the way. And all of the colored NPCs you meet in this chapter are based on Asgore as well. 7 colored flowers. Flowery is one of the 7 of them, by the way. And they are based on the 6 human souls from Undertale, except for Flowery, because he's based on Flowey from Undertale. Except he's just better though. And just like Flowery is a boss fight, and he is the final boss of this chapter. And this boss uses the orange soul mode for the first time ever. And the orange soul mode uses that dash, and you can dash through objects in the box, which is pretty cool, actually. It also moves by itself, so it can be hard to control sometimes. But people say that the boss was hard, but compared to the secret boss of this chapter, I think Flowery is very easy. I beat him first try. Also, his boss name is fudging awesome, man. Literally one of, if not the best boss name in the game. Also, Flowery technically has 2 phases. Like, when you complete his first phase, you get to this climbing section that uses the orange soul mode, and then the second phase begins with Flowery using the power of friendship and becoming Omega Flowery. And this phase uses the Temple Run-esque running segment thing I mentioned earlier, and you can hit Omega Flowery with your sword to knock him back, and then a quick time event. I think this is the only time Chris had to fight a main boss by themselves,
and Chris won,
even against the power of friendship. That's a bad sign for the end of the game. But yeah, the chapter ends after this though. When you seal the Dark Fountain, another one opens up, and then the knight appears, and Fudging grabs Asgore, flies away, but Flowery chases it down, and then the knight gets distracted and hits a wall. But here's the sick part. Flowery uses an enemy to initiate a battle with the knight, and then he just fudging kicks the knight's butt, man. This guy is awesome, dude. But sadly, the knight shrugs off the fake stats and bifurcates Flowery. Or 1 out for my boy. The chapter ends with Susie being taken home by Chris, and now she lives in the school closet, aka Castletown. I don't think that's a good thing. And oh no, Noelle will also become a party member in chapter 6. Surely this won't go horribly. But yeah, that's the end of chapter 5, and you know, it was pretty good, but not as good as chapter 3 or 4. Once again, chapter 3 and 4 still on top in my opinion. Okay, maybe it is a little better than chapter 3 though. I don't know, but just not story wise. I feel like the story was kind of lacking in this chapter. I kind of hate Deltarune. Okay, I'm joking. I don't hate this game. Like, I love this game, actually. But I sure as heck hated working on this video. Mostly because of the script. Oh, the script. I had to rewrite this script 4 fudging times, man. And it was agonizing, dude. This is like the 4th version of the fudging script, man. I hate writing scripts. I'm probably gonna stop writing scripts, man. Anyway, that was Deltarune for now. Next year, we could potentially see chapter 6. And it will hopefully be what I wanted from chapter chapter 5 of Deltarune. More serious chapter with stakes. Hopefully the soundtrack will be a banger as well, and I hope they expand upon the meta narrative that this chapter tried to expand on. I mean, we got a hint of it from Lord Wizard Rousey, but unfortunately he was interrupted because Flowery already told Susie. And hopefully we'll definitely get a more in-depth explanation from Rousey in chapter 6. At least I hope so. Something I did forget to mention was these egg rooms, and they're in every chapter in the game. To be honest, I have no idea what the significance of the eggs are, though. But yeah, Deltarune was great, though I still think that chapter 5 could have been, you know, at least a little better in the story department. I know it's supposed to be the nostalgia chapter, but still, I wish it could have been a little better. Well, that's about it for me, dog. I'm out of here.